see neurology. First, we are going to see the structure and function of neurons. So the first part of the general structure of neuron is like this. This is the neural cell body. This is the axon hillock. This is the axon, and this is the axon term. This is the general structure of a neuron. First, let us draw these branches. These branches are dendrites of the neuron. This is the soma, cyton, or the cell body. This is the axon hillock. This is the axon, and this is the axon terminal. These are the dendrites. So this is the basic structure of a neuron. So first, let us see dendrites. So the dendrites are the specialized structures which are responsible for gathering the information as well as for passing away the sensory information. So they have different types of ligand-gated ion channels. As we can see here, these are the ligand-gated ion channels which are present on the dendrites. They also have some G protein coupled receptors, which we have seen in general physiology, membrane functioning. So the ligand-gated ion channels are responsible for graded potential, which includes EPSPs and IPSPs. So one type of ligand-gated channels are stimulated by the positive kind of neurotransmitters, stimulatory neurotransmitters, and they help in the depolarization of the membrane by letting the positive charge ion flow inside the membrane. The second type of ligand-gated ion channels are those which are sensitive to the inhibitory type of neurotransmitters, and they allow the negative charge to flow inside the membrane by causing the membrane to repolarize. Alright, so these are the two types of ligand-gated ion channels, and they are responsible for graded potential. The next is the G protein coupled receptor, which stimulate the secondary messenger, and then further the secondary messenger stimulates the protein kinases, which phosphorylate some proteins present on the cell membrane, which in turn do the same thing, that is they help in graded potential by stimulating EPSPs or IPSPs. So after seeing the dendrites, let us talk about the cell body or the cyton, or we can say soma. Right. So this is the cell body. As we can see here, this is the cell body. So cell body is also responsible for graded potential. The same thing can happen here as well, and ligand-gated ion channels can be present directly on the cell body instead of being present on the dendrites. So it is responsible for graded potential. Cell body is also responsible for synthesis of some of the proteins, and it also has small ribosomal protein structures which are called Nissus granules. Nissus granules. They are responsible for protein synthesis. So the cell body synthesizes proteins for neurotransmitters, enzymes, and membrane proteins, certain kind of membrane proteins. So that was all about cell body. Now let us talk about axon. This is an important part. Axon is responsible for the conduction of action potentials. That is, we can say it is responsible for carrying the depolarization wave or the repolarization wave throughout its length. So axon has basically two kinds of proteins. Let me name it here. Axon has two kinds of proteins. So the one type of protein is kinesin and the other is dynein. These two are more or less antagonistic proteins to each other. Kinesin protein help to transfer the substances from the cell body to the axon terminal. That is, they help to transfer the substances this way. And dynein protein are just the antagonistic of kinesin protein. That is, they help to transfer the substances this way. So this is kinesin protein and this is dynein protein. So they transfer the substances from cell body to axon terminal. That is, they show anterograde axonal transport. Dynein protein are just opposite of kinesin. They transfer the substances from axonal terminal to cell body. That is, they show retrograde axonal transport. It also carries nerve growth factors. Dynein protein used to carry some certain nerve growth factors towards the cell body, or we can say towards the genome of the cell, so that the cell can react accordingly and responds towards the growth factors for development of certain structures throughout the neuron cell. Alright. So next, after the axon, let us move towards the axon terminal, which is very important. Axon terminal, it is the secretory region from where the neurotransmitter is released. This neurotransmitter is released. Alright. Reuptake of neurotransmitter also takes place here at the axon terminal, as we'll see using the reuptake protein. Alright. So the basic function mechanism after all this is there are certain vesicles which are located at the terminal portion of the axon, which contain the neurotransmitter, and they have the structures called V snares. And similarly on the membrane we have this antagonistic structures called T snares. So when the calcium ion inflows in the axon terminal portion of the axon due to the depolarization wave, then what happens is the V snares and T snares come close together, so it pulls these vesicles towards the membrane of the axon, and ultimately the thing which becomes is that it joins the membrane of the axon terminal and the neurotransmitter is released outside in the extracellular medium. Since once the neurotransmitter is released, it passes on towards the next neuron, which has the receptor sites for the neurotransmitter here, and it directly passes from here to here, and this gap between two neurons is called synapse. This is the synaptic cleft. So once it reaches the receptors located on the dendrites of the next neuron, it starts showing the similar neural signal on the next neuron. So how it terminates, how the action of the neurotransmitter terminates, it can be reuptake by the same neuron or it is degraded. The mechanism of reuptake is very important. That is, there is a certain kind of reuptake protein located on the terminal portion of the same axon, which is responsible for taking the neurotransmitter back inside the neuron. Alright. So now let us see the structural classification of the neurons. So on the basis of structure, there are basically most important three kinds of neuron. There are certain other types of neurons also, but they are not at all important. The three kinds are multipolar, bipolar, and pseudounipolar. The multipolar neurons are found in most of the places of the body, example in the primary motor cortex or in the cerebellum, because they have to gather information from a lot of areas. So there are a lot of dendrites located which are useful in gathering information from all the directions. Alright. So this is the function of multipolar neurons. Bipolar neuron, you have to remember that it is located in the retina, the olfactory epithelium, and the inner ear. Alright, retina, olfactory epithelium, and inner ear. And the pseudounipolar neurons are located in the dorsal root ganglion of the spinal cord, and they are also located in the fifth cranial nerve ganglion, that is the trigeminal ganglion. So this is the thing you need to remember, where the pseudounipolar neuron is located. So now let us see the functional classification of the neuron. On the basis of the function, they can be classified as sensory neurons, motor neurons, and there is a third category as well, which is the interneurons. So let us see the sensory neurons first. The neurons which are sensory, they take the nerve impulse from the different regions of the body to the central nervous system. Right. This is the function of sensory neurons, and the motor neurons do the opposite of the sensory neurons. That is, they take information from the central nervous system to different parts of the body. Right. So let us see the neurons which take information, the nerve impulses from the lungs or the heart muscles and other kind of similar areas towards the central nervous system are called general vascular afferent neurons. All the sensory neurons are called afferent. Right. And all the motor neurons are called efferent. So these type of neurons which take the information from the general viscera of the body to the CNS are called general visceral afferent neurons. Alright. Then the next category is general somatic afferent neurons, which take the information from skin, the ligaments of the body, and all the superficial aspects of the body to the central nervous system are called general somatic afferent. Now we have to remember two special categories called the eye and the ear. The neurons which take information from the eye and the ear to the central nervous system are categorized as special somatic afferent neurons. You need to remember these categories or groups of neurons. The last category is the neurons which take the information from the olfactory and the gustatory areas, basically the nose and the tongue, to the central nervous system are called special visceral afferent neurons. So these are the four simple categories. The next is the classification of the motor neurons. The motor neurons, again, they can be classified as general visceral afferent neurons, the neurons which take the information from CNS to the general viscera of the body, for example the heart, the lung, and the glands. The next category is the general somatic afferent neurons, which take the information from the central nervous system to the skin and the superficial aspects of the body. And there is one more important category of neurons, which are special visceral efferent neurons. They basically take information, they are the cranial nerves which give information to the pharyngeal arches, which are present in the embryonic stage. You know, there are 5 pharyngeal arches. So the cranial nerves 5, 7, 9, and 10 do this function. The cranial nerve, because they are motor. So the cranial nerve 5th supplies to the first pharyngeal arch, 7 supplies to the second pharyngeal arch, 9 supplies to the third pharyngeal arch, 10 supplies to the fourth and the sixth pharyngeal arch. As we know that there is no fifth pharyngeal arch. There are first, second, third, fourth, and then sixth pharyngeal arch. We know this from embryology. Alright, and then the last category is the interneurons. The interneurons are also called relay neurons, and they provide connection between the sensory and motor neurons. Example in the brain, some of the interneuron examples located in the brain are nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. So in the next part, we will see the resting membrane potential. Thanks.